All right, it's time. We're back again. Selway Techno Saturdays here on 343 TV, brought to you by 343 Labs Music Production School. Having a fun one today. We're going to get kind of deep and nerdy about some of this stuff, I think. I've got a good old friend of mine here, PJay, to show us his modular gear, and we're just going to talk about, you know, how he makes music with his setup, and I don't know, have some fun with that. So anyway, welcome everybody. Glad to see a lot of familiar faces in the chat again. John H. Kingston III, Paul Vanderwerf. Hello from Austin, says Jinx, I guess. Two Seth is back. Simple Sam, Enigmatic Onion, Lies Society. Andrew Duke, hello. So yeah, this is going to be kind of fun. I just want to mention before we start diving in, I keep having to put off having a Radioactive Man back. I know there's people out there who've been waiting for that. We had our sort of stream catastrophe a couple of weeks ago. And then this weekend he wasn't able to do it, so I swapped. You know, PJay was going to come on next week, but we swapped them. Thankfully, we were able to do that. So everybody who's waiting for Keith Tenniswood, Radioactive Man, fear not, he will be with us next weekend, barring any other unforeseen circumstances. Gen X, this person says, that's pretty cool. Hello, CHDB Music, welcome. Max Wild is here. Our overlord here at 343 Labs. And excellent. So without further ado, well, no, I'm sorry. I always do this. I get ahead of myself. I'm going to have a little bit more ado here. We usually do a giveaway. And this week is no exception. I believe we have the vocal synth, the Isotope vocal synth, as a giveaway this week. So that's a really cool plugin if you're into doing cool processing with vocals, you know, vocoding, pitch correction, and more. It does a lot of really amazing stuff. So definitely, if enter, we'll have the link here to enter in the chat, and we will announce the winner, you know, about the last 15 minutes of the show usually. And a lot of you guys know we're here almost every day at 1 p.m. We have a lot of content on different elements of music production. Today is my day. Yesterday we had Abe Duque. Coming up Monday, Tips and Tricks with Daltrick. And yeah, definitely, if you haven't already, please subscribe and give us a reaction, whatever that might be. Check out our links below if you want more information on what we do as a school. You know, we have classes and online courses running. I've got a synthesis course starting this week on Wednesday, so I don't know. If you've been thinking about it, you're on the fence, now's a good time to jump in. We have locations in Berlin and New York if you want to do something in person. And also, you know, we're working on building up and growing our Discord community. We've got a lot of stuff going on there. We've got events that we do. We have challenges, beat battles, things like that. You can get feedback, hook up with like-minded music producers, and I don't know. Come hang out with us. So, speaking of hanging out, I've been hanging out with PJay. I've known him for a long time, since the 90s, I believe. He's been I said this in the description, you know, when I posted on Facebook today, he's been a stalwart of the New York City techno underground. He's been there. He knows everybody. He's like a behind-the-scenes guy. He's a promoter. He's a DJ. He makes music. Let me stop talking about him and bring him in here. Welcome, PJay. How's it going today?
Hey, John. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. I know. I think we've talked on and off for years about, you know, music and stuff. And I know you've been on this modular thing for a long time. I would say more, recently it's become so big.
It's exploded in the past few years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I figured if I'm going to ask anybody I know to come on, also you're, I'll mention this. You do design instruction for Parsons still, don't you?
Was a professor at Pratt for a while.
Pratt, I'm sorry.
Teaching graphic design, graduate marketing, and some other stuff.
Yeah, so you're a serious cat, basically.
I left there to open my own music school for a while up on 27th Street, where we were teaching modular and analog. That's where a lot of the equipment you're going to see is still from. And I still give private lessons and stuff like that. I thought we were doing an hour on ghost producing, but okay, let's talk modular instead. That's cool.
It's a good thing you're all ready and set up to do a stream then, gosh.
Yes, I happen to be here with all these cameras that I have.
Yeah, I got to tell you guys, I mean, you know this, streaming can be a tightrope walk with the technology and getting the video and audio hooked up. And we had to definitely get in and do the nitty gritty and prepare for this. But it looks like, we've got a pretty good setup. You can see on the bottom of the screen there's a shot of his modular, or part of his modular setup. He's got a lot more than that. And you can hear his music running in the background while we talk. Let's see what's going on in the chat real quick. Yes, of course, we have got the giveaway link in here, so jump on that.
I thought I get the giveaway. That's not how this works. I don't get the giveaway.
We'll talk about that later, PJay.
Honestly, I don't even use software. Just to get this off the bat, I know very, very little about software. Going back to my history as a graphic designer, when I was growing up and doing music, I'm on the computer 24/7 doing my graphic design in Illustrator and Photoshop. I do not want to be on the computer when I make my music. I feel like I'm working over there, plus all the distractions and stuff. So one of the big things I love about modular is, my modular never interrupts me with a ping that I've got a private message coming in. So it's kind of nice like that. But I'm pretty ignorant of the stuff on your side. I know very little about plugins. I love making fun of plugins because I'm just a hardware guy.
Right.
But there's a lot of disadvantages to this hardware. And all this mess of cables here, I kind of wish this wasn't in front of my interface. But the cables themselves are actually part of the interface itself that we'll get into. The routing and the plugging in of the cables is a large part of the modular production.
That's totally true. There's someone here, let's see, Seth, he's a regular of ours, says, I'm just getting into modular, so he has many questions. He's not sure how to... All right, I think he means put. It's a typo here, but I have a vague idea of what I want to build. So, yeah, that's something we could talk about, actually, like where to get started.
There's a million different approaches to modular. There's a million different ways to use this. I was going to make a suggestion to, I think most of your crowd are Ableton people, is that correct?
Mostly, yeah.
Or different software, all your software people.
I think most people are software based because, hardware can be a daunting and expensive thing to get into.
Yes, well, the software gets expensive too, doesn't it? You're paying a lot of money for plugins. The way I like to look at this, something I mentioned to you the other day, is maybe forget about the, is it analog, is it digital? Because a lot of these units I've got here are actually digital units. But a lot of this modular is about the interface. So if I were to buy this synthesizer as a plugin, I would want that synthesizer to come with its own controller with all these knobs on it.
Right.
And I don't care if it's a digital thing in the background but I like getting this analog synthesizer because it happens to have a control knob on it, or this one has beautiful sliders all over it.
Right.
So this has a lot to do with interface, which is also some of the limitations that we're going to be dealing with here too.
Definitely. There's another question here from Composite Particles. PJay, you don't use a DAW to record into?
Okay, so I do, all my studio does get hooked up into my Mac Mini. And you might laugh at me, but I'm using Audacity, and I use Audacity like it's a tape recorder.
It's good for that.
So when I do a track, maybe after I do a track, I might drop a voice over the top or something like that, but I never multi-track in my music. And at the same time, when I'm doing my studio work, and this might be a big reason why I'm so into the hardware, my studio work is all practice for when I play live sets in a club or in a warehouse.
Sure.
Which is a little different than a lot of other producers. So I'm dealing with a lot of limitations here due to my hardware systems because of that. So this little case here folds up into three, the top comes down and this whole thing folds up, and I can fly with this.
Yeah.
So if I have a gig in Detroit, I don't want to write anything here in my studio that I can't go play in Detroit a few months from now.
That makes sense. Well, and if your primary outlet is performing live, you want it to sound the way you want it to sound in that context. And
yes,
also, when you do go to record it, it's like it matches. It's not like your record is this big, shiny multi-track production with tons of plugins on it, and then when you play live, it sounds totally different. What you hear is what you get. So I think that's kind of a nice way to do it.
Another thing with Modular is I can bring this same case out several times and have the same patterns and leave the cables, not reroute anything. And the set's going to sound different each time I play it because that's the nature of Modular. I don't really have any memory here. Some of these units I can save a couple patterns, but this spaghetti of wires, I could take a photo of it and maybe recreate it in a few months. But you don't do that.
Right.
You set the stuff up once, you run through it. So everything's got to be perfect. When I make a track, my mix has to be dead on because I can't go back and take that hand clap out like you can on the digital side.
Did you ever think about some kind of hybrid setup where you can do the stereo mix and multi-track at the same time?
Back to your listener's question, there's a lot of different ways to use the Modular, and I've seen a lot of people kill themselves with headaches trying to get their digital music, their digital machines to work in sync and in time with the Modular. But one of my favorite suggestions to you digital guys is to get a little Modular setup or a small case like that, and you can sample, whether it's phrase sampling or whether it's individual strike sampling. Let me pull this back and show you my larger unit here.
Let's switch. We're going to switch our scenes here so we can get a better view of everything.
So now these are my big racks over here. And one of the things I do in my music production is I never, ever use a sample that I purchase or that I buy from somewhere else. All my samples are completely homemade from this analog modular equipment.
Cool.
And it gives my music a unique sound and style. So one of the easiest ways is to get a little modular setup and just phrase sample it into your hardware. This rack over here, an entire row of this over here, are all just filters. And one of the things you probably know from your production lessons from John is that the filter of a synthesizer is the voice, is the sound of the synthesizer.
Sure.
It's never about the oscillators. Every square wave oscillator sounds the same.
If you're using simple waveforms like squares and sawtooths, but there are other types of oscillators that do create more complex tones, like wavetable, for example.
Definitely,
or
definitely.
FM.
Wavetable's a huge thing in the modular world now.
Yeah,
FM
it's become more.
has come in, and polyphony is an interesting issue. One of the things we were talking about earlier when we were just setting up, is I've got this huge, beautiful, latest, greatest synthesizer voice, but it's a mono synthesizer.
Yeah.
This is 32 HP. That's the sizing for these units. And I'm trying to cram as many units into this case as possible because one more unit is one more sound, clap, kick drum. It's one more thing I can make use of because I don't really have that much in here. I've only got a few drum machines, a few little synthesizers, some filters, and this sequencer down here is taking up more than my synth over here. But back to my point was this 32 HP wide single voice, next to it is this little slim that takes up 4 HP, this tiny little thing that has 21 oscillators inside it. Now that's a digital unit.
Right.
Again, I don't really, this is actually a super sawtooth, if you guys have heard of super saw.
It's a bunch of sawtooth waves stacked together and detuned, basically.
Right, and it gives you this big, beautiful, moving, let's see, actually, I think, there we go.
You can bring the level on the rack up.
Let's bring these. This is one voice as a square wave, and now I can add 21 voices. Now, if I go up too far and detune, it gets a little sour.
Or it gets noisy.
Yeah, it gets noisy, which might work out well for this techno. And the only other thing, so let's go to here. The only things I can do with this unit is change from a saw to a triangle.
It gets darker.
Back to a square. And I can change the pitch of it. But that's the only thing I can do with that unit.
Yeah, but how small is that thing?
It's very small. That cost me about it's about $260 on the used market. It's about $220.
Nice.
That's another thing. There's a huge, massive used market. If you'd like to get into modular and test the waters out, and then you say, hey, this is just not for me. I don't enjoy this. It's too messy.
You just sell it.
Too much. Yeah, you can
Someone
sell
will
it
buy it
at a very low loss. Even now with COVID, it's hard to find equipment. People are selling used stuff for the new price. But it's a very low price if you want to buy some of this, test it out, and then sell it. I am constantly buying and selling modulars because I'm sure you guys are switching out your plugins all the time. And
yeah, sure. It's kind of the same thing, right? Someone, speaking of super saws, Simple Sam says it's a trance machine. But that's not what we're doing today.
Yes, that's actually what it was designed for. The company that made it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And now you notice the sound is just constant. I don't have a VCA on it or anything like that. That unit is strictly droning. It's just an oscillator.
And it's not gonna. You're not gonna do trance melodies with it. You're not hooking up a sequencer to it and gating it and going.
Oh, I could. That's what most people do with it.
Right.
That's what it was designed for. Right. Is that you can hear it in the sound.
Right.
Like if I start gating that sound, which we could do if we switch some wires around here, it would get kind of interesting in there.
So yeah, Tusith mentions, I went into Modular thinking it was cheap, but it's pretty spendy for cool modules. And also they add up quickly. Well, speaking of spendy modules, that one right in the middle there, I know is not a budget.
So yeah, let's talk pricing. So this one just came in. Actually, I just had to learn this one in the past few days. What we're looking at is a clone of a Yamaha CS80. It's something called the Deckard's Dream, which is a desktop synthesizer you can buy. That
synth is what, thousands of dollars?
It's about $3,500, $4,000.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. The Yamaha CS80 was a very interesting synthesizer. What I've got in front of me, so the Yamaha CS80 inspired the Deckard's Dream. Now that's obviously from Blade Runner, Deckard. This was inspired by that, and this is one single voice. So instead of 8 voices, really kind of 16 voices that has, this is a single voice, or technically it's a half a voice. It's not nearly as powerful, but I've got a lot of interesting sliders and ins and outs on here that make this a very interesting unit.
Well, yeah, taking like it's a monophonic CS80 with patch points, that's amazing. Because the tone of this thing.
Yes, and if you're a Blade Runner fan, you can let's bring that one on. Sure. You can really hear the Blade Runner soundtrack.
I like that.
So it's a very pretty, beautiful kind of thing. If you want, let's since we're talking about this now, I'm going to skip ahead. We'll get back to the little Moog thing, but let's talk about this Deckard's voice for a second.
Play with this a little bit. I just want to acknowledge the chat again. Let's see here. Jamie89 mentions FM and additive subtractive. I get modular breaks my brain. I just started trying VCV.
Ah, yes. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting things in the middle of all this, and VCV is a modeled digital version of all of these. So you can get most of these synths and most of these boxes that I have here. You can buy them and use them. You're going to lose the controller aspect that I love so much about.
Can you not? You could route MIDI into it though from external.
Yes, I can get a box in my modular that will take a MIDI signal in and kick the sound back out to me.
Right.
And Polyphony, so getting back to the other thing, so that the little chainsaw, that little trance unit, the skinny one, was designed to add Polyphony to your Eurorack.
Oh, okay.
I've got a few other smaller units that'll do chords, which get kind of interesting, because for years, chords and anything with Polyphony was just a very difficult thing to do, because you want to do 3 voices, you need 3 VCOs.
3 oscillators. Yeah.
Now you're going to need 3 envelopes. You're going to need 3 ADSRs. You're going to need
do
3
real
filters. Poly, right. But there's also a lot you can do with just a single voice mono synthesizer. So I have this set up to do a little example for you guys. The way I have this working and routed, I've got 3 separate routings coming out of this synthesizer. So let's look at the first one, which is basically as if it were a desktop. It's the same thing. And the interesting thing about this unit, I don't know if you can read what's here, but this particular unit has both a low pass and a high pass filter at the same time.
Okay.
And between using the 2 of them, you can actually squash it and get a nice band pass, which is what I'm doing here now. So that's with no resonance. Oh, and another thing that I noticed the first time I turned this on is usually you can push the resonance on a filter until you get until it self-oscillates.
Right. This one doesn't do that, huh?
This one does not do that.
It's smoother sounding.
I was a little surprised at first. I'm like, wow, there's less power in this. But that's not actually the case. There's a lot of power with this setup. Another interesting thing is usually you have ADSR. This has ADR and then IL and AL, which is very interesting. It's the initial level and then the attack level.
Oh, all right.
So if I bring these down, now we're just using the ADSR, and I can, we can make a. So actually, everybody should know there's 2 ADSRs on every synthesizer voice, right? There's one right now down here, and there's one up here. The one down here is controlling the whole thing. So now we're just getting a short little. Now we're getting a long sound. The second one is controlling the filter. So if I put this one up, you hear those high tones a little sharper, a little brighter. Okay, so let's go back to, so we've got this little voice, we can do this, we can do that with it. I'm gonna shut that off and I'm gonna turn on a second voice coming out of the same monophonic synthesizer. Okay, now you hear how this has a completely different tone to it. That different tone is because I'm running that through a different filter. I'm running that through this MMF filter down here. And remember, the filter is the character of a synthesizer. So I'm taking the same sound from here, but by running it through a different filter, which I'm going to play with now, it completely changes the character of it. I'm also giving it a different envelope. I'm giving it a different... so all these controls over here and all these controls down here are turned off for this voice because I'm pulling out before that. Now I've even got, this one's my most favorite, I've got a third signal coming out.
Is that a pulse wave?
This is all coming from the same voice. So yeah, so they're all different waves. One was a saw, one was a square. The original one, let's actually go back to the first one. This one is either, this is the filter, hear how bright, sharp, right, and present that is. Now I can also just put a sine wave.
Can you bring up the level just a little bit of the Decker stream?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you hear how mellow that sine wave is? This is a basic production point that everybody should know about: sine, square, triangle, and all those waves. Sine waves have no information, no harmonic content to be filtered out of them. So actually, let's take one step back.
You're doing my synthesis course now. This is exactly
the East Coast,
the kind
West
of stuff.
Coast well, okay, here's my large point about modular. I've been doing the studio, I've been working with synthesizers since I was 8 years old. I thought I knew VCAs and VCFs and oscillators. I thought I knew studio work until I got into this modular stuff. And now using this modular for about 5 or 6 years now, I have a completely different top-down understanding of all these smaller parameters in music. And if I throw out all this modular and go back to production on the computer, I'm a much stronger producer for having used this equipment.
No, I think the detail and understanding and like what you learn about sound from using modular definitely deepens your overall understanding of making electronic music in any situation.
That's one of the best things I've gotten out of it, was a much better understanding of production. So even if you're just studying this stuff, or even if you use VCV Rack and never buy any of this, there's a lot of information you can learn here. Like, don't try filtering a sine wave. It's not going to give you anything. If you want something meaty to filter out,
what you just
it's
said,
a square wave.
What about lots of sine waves?
Well,
That's
now
different.
we get in. Now we get into sinusoidal synthesis. So all
like
sounds can be broken down.
Additive
synthesis, yes, which has made its way into Eurorack, believe it or not.
Sure, I'm not surprised.
Even though it's a little tricky, again, like Polyphony, it's
got to be
thing
digital
to do with cabling,
usually.
you know. Yes.
Like some of these types of synthesis, when we talk about wavetable, we talk about additive, they were really designed from a computer standpoint. They're designed in software largely.
Yes.
Maybe initially they might have been theorized and built with modular systems, but you know, you look at like a Waldorf wave or up to the modern wavetable synths, it's based on digital to analog conversion. Like it has to start with numbers to
Very
really,
much so.
yeah. So,
yes.
But that's the thing with modular. Nowadays, you can have digital synthesizer modules that interface with analog modules, and you can come up with really interesting hybrids.
I'd say about a third of my units are digital, and a little more than half or so would be analog. But my analog units have digital controllers in them. So,
yeah,
you know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was a big question, is it analog or is it digital? And the digital stuff wasn't up to spec. And I will note that some of the early Eurorack digital units are not good enough. I've actually just recently sold off a few early ones that were good. This new Super Saw Wave is excellent. It's compared to old synthesizers and everything. This is one of the best sounding Super Saws I've heard.
Well, and I think a lot of the digital processing and the algorithms that people are using to create these sounds are getting better all the time.
Much better, much better. And now we're at a point where it's not really a question anymore. Hence, I go back to the point that this is really more about interface than using the analog or anything like that, you know. But let's take one step further back now that we're talking about sines versus squares and filtering. Let's use that as the little Bob Moog introduction. Because there's two kinds of modular, okay? There's East Coast and West Coast. East Coast was Bob Moog. West Coast was Don Buchla, and I'm sure, John, you've heard of the Buchla synthesizers.
Absolutely.
So picture, you know, California and New York, the different personalities between the two. The guy out in California who was literally doing acid with his friends and stuff like that, you know, real hippie kind of culture.
You mean the guys that left the traces of LSD on the knobs of the modular that the engineer
literally have done that. Yes, those people, when they made these modular units, a West Coast modular unit can do anything. So an East Coast modular unit, Bob Moog is like, here's your envelope generator, here's an ADSR. These are very specific, and this is how you're going to use it. Don Buchla on the West Coast, taking his acid and smoking his weed, was like, here's something called a function generator, and it generally sends signals that go up, they rise, and they fall, but you can use this as an ADSR, but you can also use this as an oscillator. A lot of this stuff can be used in multiple ways, and the West Coast synthesis really plays up on that.
Right.
The units aren't as specific, and some people really love the Buchla sound.
I do. I like, but it's not just about Buchla. It's directly. It's the types of oscillators that he built and the waveform kind of modulation that happens from the beginning. It's more in the world of like FM and with
this
a lot
is
of
all
audio
due
rate
to his
modulation.
approach. That anything can do anything. And so
I want to get back into sort of stylistic things. Like we're talking about, you know, synthesis and theory here, but also like why might you pick something like a Buchla or a similar system to make techno sounds with? Because that's one of the reasons I like the complex oscillator kind of stuff, is that the inharmonic, noisy, kind of clangy, trippy stuff you can do with those off the bat is very techno sounding.
There's a lot of fun, playful stuff with West Coast.
Not that you don't make techno with Moog or typical subtractive synthesis. Obviously, a lot of cool stuff is just straight up normal bread and butter subtractive synthesis. But like that whole system was designed to simplify the sound design for musicians that are used to cleaner, clearer musical tones coming from acoustic instruments, right? Whereas Buchla was like, let's explore and see how crazy we can get.
Again, East Coast, West Coast differences. Yeah, so Buchla would take a sine wave and add to it. He would take the sine wave and fold it, which puts little sharp edges on it. Now you're getting into like the sharp edge of a square wave a little more. So he would add, so additive synthesis was the West Coast style. Moog would take a synth tone and subtract from it. Subtractive synthesis that we're all familiar with. So Moog was the original. Before there were synthesizers, there were modular synthesizers. I want to make that point. It's not like when did modular synthesizers start? The original synthesizers were modular. Your oscillator, your HP oscillator would be the size of your oven.
I got to call out a name in the chat. Daniel from IntelliGel is in the chat.
What's up, Daniel?
We have a real serious producer manufacturer of some of the most amazing modules out there joining us today.
Makes
Welcome.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So yeah, let's let's move over down here. Let's actually point at our.
Yeah, I knew you were going to do this. You're breaking into the Moog demonstration.
This is my 1972.
Oh, you're just showing
black
off
painted. Now I'm showing off. It's painted black. Now a lot of people would take a mini Moog, a wood mini Moog back in the day, and they'd strip them down and paint them, which is kind of a horrible thing to do. This has an interesting history because not only is it a low, this is serial number 3021. So they made 10,000. This is number 3,000. So it's an early generation. But Moog opened a showroom in Ohio just for less than a year, and then they closed it up. And the showroom had a grand opening, and the showroom painted this black for the grand opening. So it was this is actually maybe the one legit black mini Moog that's out there, which is kind of cool. And I have a ribbon controller for it made by another company that happens to be a black one, and they never made black ones. And so this worked out pretty well. But anyway, my whole point, going back to Bob Moog and all that, Bob Moog hated this, did not want to make this mini Moog. Believe it or not, the mini Moog that made his company, without this mini Moog, you wouldn't be talking about
That's
Moog.
Interesting.
Bob hated the mini Moog, and his staff made this behind his back. And I'll prove that to you. If we look at this keyboard here, right? There's a weird number of keys here, right? This keyboard should kind of stop over here.
Right.
Okay, the reason this keyboard has an odd number of keys is because they had to work behind Bob's back because he would yell at them every time he caught them working on this project. And in the closet of extra parts they had, they grabbed a half chunk of a keyboard that they had sawed off of something else that was this size. And that's why the Moog keyboard is like this. So they put this all together, they showed it to Bob. Bob said he hated it. Because what Bob does and his company did at the time, they build large, powerful synthesizers.
Sure,
this is not as powerful.
Surely he must have saw that it was necessary to simplify it in order to get it into the hands of more musicians.
Well, exactly.
That's what I always tell people. Like that's like the whole reason behind this design.
So that's exactly what it is. But Bob didn't want to simplify. To him, that was simplifying all these complex and powerful synths that he made.
Yeah.
So his guys knew that musicians don't want the technical stuff. You're not there to geek out. You're there to make music.
Right.
And this is designed for that.
Okay.
And what I'd like to show off in my very first Modular 101 classes is that all the boxes I have in my Modular, here's a box, here's a box, here's a box, here's a box, here's a box.
It is a modular synth underneath.
This is a modular synth, yes. And there's actually 3 jacks on the back that I can patch things in and out of. Now there's another thing I'd like to point out too. This is a module here, the power. This is a module here, the keyboard, and this is a module here, the modifiers.
Right.
So this is kind of like an LFO. This is your sequencer, because up here in the rack, you guys don't see any keys, right? I don't really have any keys up there.
No.
So this unit gets replaced with a sequencer. There is one keyboard up there. And just for a minute, let's talk about power. Okay, so I'm gonna come back up here. And when I want to add, John, you asked me like if I wanted to add a little distortion to this. I can't just, from a menu, I can't call up a plugin and plug in something and now I've got distortion on top of this. I have to go across the room and I have to go get this. You know, or I have to go get something.
You got to think ahead when you're putting these patches together. Like, you got to. It's a lot of planning involved.
Well, even before that, so the planning is creating this. To me, this unit, this whole unit, my portable rig, is instead of going out and buying the Buchla suitcase kind of thing, that's an instrument. This is my instrument, and I've chosen the pieces of my instrument for whatever I wanted to do. My last one was an ambient rig. This is designed specifically to make techno. I'm not finished with it yet. That's why I kind of wanted to be on your show in 2 weeks. But there's more than enough in here to do this and show this off.
Yeah, I really appreciate you
still moving stuff in and out.
I really appreciate you coming in early because we had the scheduling with Keith. So that's really great.
I'm thrilled to be here. And John, you've always DJ'd my little underground New York City parties when like nobody knows who's playing, and then John Selway shows up and does a live set. It's been wonderful. So
thanks,
thank
man.
you.
Yeah, we go back.
Right
I gotta say,
totally. So let me show you. So again, this is a typical modular unit. This is the back of. Oh, this one had. Look at this. That's
sassy.
It's called Pamela's Workout. So that's Pamela. Okay, but I need to power all these units. So a little power cord plugs in here, and then this plugs into, in the back of here, I've got power. So usually you don't have to think about power, which is why I'm bringing it up. I need to think about power because I've only got so many volts in my system here,
Sure.
and I need to make sure I have room. So if I want to add a little distortion, it's not easy. I happen to have down here a little something called a phosphor drive, and if you see this little phosphor unit, basically a vacuum tube. I think you guys are all familiar with LED
So
or vacuum
that's a tube preamp or distortion?
Yes, it's a little tube distortion thing. I'm
Nice.
using it. I'm using it on my hi-hats here.
You're crunching up your hi-hats. Now, I've been
crunching
wanting
up
you to
my
get
hi-hat.
into some beats. We've been tripping out,
Yeah,
listening
let's
to
talk
Deckard's
beats.
voice, just like kind of,
Yes.
ambient in the background, but like,
Yes.
you're
let's
here to
move-
make
so,
some techno, and I don't know.
yes.
I tried to update the title for the stream to techno and electro because you're into both.
Me and you were both into both,
Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting. What's techno? What's electro? Where are these two styles and genres going? How different are they? Because to me, the same track, the same programming. If I just change the kick drum, now we've got an electro beat,
Well,
and
right.
it completely changes it. And now you were mentioning there's a few other
Sure.
differences that you find between techno and electro. So
Well,
let's hear
absolutely.
you.
But like, let's bring up your groove and listen to it.
Okay, so yeah, let's throw this on. So
Yeah,
let's
get the
see,
audio up.
let's-
I'm gonna.
Yes.
People are making comments about you. PJ's pimping with his mini Moog.
I'm proud of that mini Moog. I don't actually use it in the studio too much, believe it or not. I have some other mini Moog voices.
Okay.
And right down here at my fingertips, I have this, which I paid $50 for this little
Whoa.
unit, made by a guy somewhere in Eastern Europe. This is the best, besides this.
What's it called?
So this is called the Blue Lantern Space Moth filter.
Okay.
And now it's funny because he's got 20 different Space Moth filters, and there's not many of this one. This is a Mini Moog ladder filter clone that sounds as good or better than real Mini Moogs. There's
Interesting.
other copies of it that don't sound as good as this. But this unit, I paid $50. You'd have to pry this out of my dead hands. I even have, if we move up here, this unit on the wall here, this is a Mini Moog
Sure.
filter. And to me, the character of a Mini Moog is that filter. There's nothing like a Mini Moog filter. This, John, you might have been there. We had Bob Moog himself come to New York City and give a talk at one of our techno events.
I remember.
And in the middle of a party at 12:30 or midnight, we shut the hard techno off and we handed a microphone to an 80-year-old man. And I didn't know what was going to happen. But the crowd listened to him like he was a god.
Well,
which
he is. He was. To
Right.
people
They
into
gave him so
synthesizers.
much respect, and he pulled out his own filter to use, and I said, "No, Bob, please use mine." So
Nice.
for the demo, Bob played through. So I'm very attached to that one.
Of course, and you got it prominently on display there.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. So okay. So back to
Yeah, let's get some
all right,
beats
so
going.
let's fire this up. Yeah. Oh, so actually, that's a great lead-in because my earliest studio use. A friend of mine had a Mini Moog, and I had brought my 909 over to his studio, and I like to just plug different things into different things, which is what's nice about Modular. Any ins can go to any outs can go to any ins. And one of my absolute favorite things to do is to run a 909 through a filter.
Sure.
When you're producing, here's a good one for all your techno producers out there. When you produce techno, I might have maybe, let's say, 20 different sounds here, but you want all those sounds to kind of glue together and work as one unit. And by running all my 9 drum sounds through a filter, I'm really squashing them and giving them all the same kind of flavor.
Sure. Well,
It
I was
brings
going to
all
say,
the
like
sounds
when you mix drums, on a mixer in hardware or in a DAW, it's always a good idea to kind of flavor the drums, individually. You can do compression and distortion and EQ, but also taking the whole kit, running it through some kind of saturator or compressor that
Yes.
adds tone to it. So that's kind of what
Yes.
you're doing. It's a filter, but I know you're also driving it and adding harmonics, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I've got, I'll zoom in on this other unit that I want to focus on. This is my drum unit. And usually I actually don't like making drums in Eurorack.
Tell us
Anyone
what
out
that
there
is.
listening,
That's an Endorphin.
so this is called a Queen of Pentacles by a company called Endorphins. And this is a very interesting unit because a lot of these this is a very recent unit, and in the past, this would have been 4 units put together. I would have a couple drum sounds that might run through some effects, and then that whole thing would go through a filter. This one unit has all 4 of those things in it.
Yeah, I've
So
seen
what
a
I've
lot
got
more of
here-
that nowadays. Is there's a lot of Eurorack modules that are really self-contained instruments to
Yes.
themselves. That this
Yes.
alone, okay, you still need to sequence it, but this alone has drum voices and effects built in, and it's made to quickly like get a beat going without having to do a bunch of patching.
Yes, and this gets very meta that there's this unit, this one unit has like 5 other units in it, but really, let me go one step back. And this is see this little board I've got here?
Sure.
I keep this around the classroom for Modular 101 also. This is an 808 on here. This is an 808. These are all the voices of an 808. And if you could see on here, like this little box is the snare, there's a kick, there's the hi-hats.
Right.
And it's actually very simple circuitry. But I use this to make the point that all of this stuff, even the modular is modular within itself. Even your typical units are made up of smaller units of filters and VCAs. They're kind of pre-patched for you.
Right.
So yeah, let's dive into this. Let's dive into the Queen of Pentacles here.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to focus on the music. I'm gonna and then I'm gonna talk to you while you are getting into the music and getting the beat going again. And I may throw some questions at you while we go.
Cool. So we'll start with the drums, and then I can bring the synth parts that we made up in along with that. So let's bring up our drums here. Oh, and let me just explain too. So we're going to hear this unit here, but we're also going to hear this silver unit next to it. And if you're familiar with a CR78, this is kind of like, I've kind of got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 CR78 voices in here. And these voices all are running through this unit, so they go through the filter also.
So not to put the pressure on, but we've only got about 20 minutes left in the show. We can go over.
Oh, let's rock it.
No, we can go over because I want to hear some music from you, and also I want to get to everybody's questions. So
excellent. Okay, so I'll be quick with this, but on this unit I've got 3 analog voices, a kick, a snare, and a clap, which are analog.
Bring that up in the mix. Let's hear it. Let's hear it while you talk about it.
4 samples.
Okay, Chad. I'm just like, let's go, PJ. Let's go.
Let's do it.
I'm cracking the whip.
So again, here's so analog kick, couple other sounds, and
you've got a spring reverb on there, don't you?
I have what reverb?
Or some kind of reverb.
So this is my reverb unit over here, which is a pretty big unit to do reverb, but I really it wasn't even on reverb.
What am I hearing?
It's on reverb.
I'm hearing some reverb right now. What it's on the drums?
Yes, so I've got reverb on the drums here that are now off.
There we go.
Oh, so this actually
I like it a little more dry. It's a little more driving.
Sure, let's go dry now. So this drum unit also, this edge section has an effects unit built into it, and I have 8 different effects, 16 effects I can put on it.
I like this kind of electro groove you've got going, but let's pump it up a little bit.
Let's go to let's go to a 4/4.
We were talking about like what's the difference between electro and techno? Sometimes it's just the drums.
Yep.
But other times it's definitely like when you're talking about more melodic or like say more funk-oriented electro. There's some other distinctions.
I like
also
to go back and forth.
The type of synth sounds you use.
Yep. In a track, you can use both. So here's a nice little electro, and then we bring. Without the snare, it's not electro. So the snare on the 5 and the
electro kind of needs to have a backbeat, right? But if you put too much, if you put too many like 2 and 4 claps or snares in techno, sometimes you want less of that in techno and more syncopation and more upbeat kind of stuff combined with that steady kick drum.
Very much so. So let's go back to you want 4/4. There's a little 4/4 going on. We'll take this down, and now here's one of my samples coming up.
Speaking of samples on the Queen of Pentacles, there was a question here. How hard is it to swap out the samples?
Okay, excellent question, and something I wanted to get into. I have to unscrew this, pull this unit out, and then on the bottom, there's a little micro SD card that I then have to move over to my computer, and the files on there have to be named 1, 2, 3, 4, and they have to be in 8 different folders.
So it's tricky, and you can't do it while the module's
It's a pain in the ass.
So you want to pick your samples before you put it in.
Right, so I only had one opportunity to do it, and I put my own sounds in here, but I have to go back and I want to adjust the volumes so they're all level on them. But this unit's beautiful with its... And now I'll bring this up. And now I've also got distortion on here. It's actually not distortion, that's a boost.
It's still clipping something. It's boosting some amplifier in there. Like it's...
Yes, so it's boosting everything.
Yeah, so anytime you're clipping, you're distorting,
Let's bring bring some synths in. So we got our hi-hats.
Oh yeah, I was like, you gotta have the bright, sharp hi-hats. I like that.
Yes. And then if we want to make a break, like I can always pull this down, bring the reverb back up. Okay, there's our nice little break. I can do the same with the other reverb that I have over here.
What's that hi? There's an effect on that hi-hat. What's going on with that?
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. Oops. So my hi-hat has control voltage going into it. It's got a wire going into it that's giving a little signal that's moving a knob for me. That's doing that, going slowly up and down. And let's see, we can change that. So now I'm going to have to chase the wire back. Let's see, it's going to be one of these.
This is one of the things that trips me up about making music with Modular is keeping track of the patching. And then if you're performing and having to patch while you're performing, that's nuts.
This is telling me where my, this one's telling me what channel. This is my mixer, by the way.
Okay.
My mixer is just these 8 knobs.
Tiny.
Yes, and this, when I go over halfway, this mixer particularly gives me some saturation boost going on.
Okay, so yet more distortion.
Yes, a little more distortion.
I mean, I can't tell whether you're using software or hardware or modular or standalone gear, like saturation, distortion for this style of music is so important.
Yes, and that's one of the things that all these Moog units have. This drive, this overdrive, is an incredible thing. And something to know too, when Moog first gave its demonstration of the Mini Moog, one of the junior engineers multiplied a number by 1,000 instead of by 10, and he over amplified it 100 times, and that they all said it sounded wonderful, and that became overdrive.
Yeah, perfect.
It was a mistake.
I didn't know that story. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when people started distorting guitars by they're turning their amps up too much. You know, like it wasn't meant to do that.
Some of the same guys, like we mentioned, I've got a guy named Roger Meyer who built one of my units over here that I use for compression. He built the first distortion pedal for Jimi Hendrix back in the day. So let's add some sounds in here. Let's see what else we got. Whoops.
No more trance.
That was the super saw. Yeah. No, let's go. Oh wait, I have to look here. Let's see.
Do you have a way to like?
Oh, here we go. This is one of my favorite sounds. This is something called. This is a unit that's digitally mimicking the plucking of a string. It's called Carplus Strong.
Oh yeah, it's a physical modeling synthesis.
Yeah, and this unit has a life of its own. Let's just bring it in. See how it's not exactly on rhythm? It's a little weird.
That's good.
And now I've got a switch on it to. But I kind of like this little bouncing sound. And
that little trippy bouncing sound with the delay on it is definitely good, more hypnotic techno kind of a vibe than the bright sawtooth wave.
It's one of my all-time favorites, this particular unit.
Simple Sam asked, how do you go about refining the system specifically for techno? Is it just sort of working and then realizing what you need?
See, that's kind of interesting. So before this, I built just to do a few sets and to teach myself a little more. I built this same unit into an ambient system.
Okay.
I did a live show. The last thing before COVID, I did a live show at the Brooklyn Mirage when they did that all live.
I remember.
Where there's 3 rooms and everybody's playing live. I did 4 hours of live ambient off a rig like this, and I could actually take that same rig, crunch the drum sounds a little, turn up the tempo, and I could probably play some pretty good techno out of that unit also. But this rig, what we're looking at now, especially with the Queen of Pentacles, is made specifically for techno. Drums are very difficult to do in Eurorack. You're better off doing them in a drum machine that has everything all in one unit. You don't really need the spaghetti wires.
That's a really good workflow, actually. I think like keeping your drum machine separate that you have access to. There's no complication with wires.
Well, also, you don't really. You have to ask yourself, like a drum machine or reverb. Do you really need real-time parameters in reverb while you're doing a track?
Right.
Are you changing the size of your room during the track? Now you might do it. In ambient, we would definitely do it. But in techno, it's not really a parameter you need. So with drums, we're not really changing too much. But over in this one, I do have one effect here.
Okay.
And you can hear it on the clap, on the snare and the clap. I've got a bit reducer.
Oh, cool. So there's a really good question here from Tuseth. how do you switch grooves when you want to change the pattern, like switch for melody and groove?
So
like
this unit,
which is talking about sequencing. How do you?
Yep.
Yeah.
This unit only makes sounds. There's no sequencer here.
Right.
That's why a drum machine's more convenient. So all this mess of white cables going down here to this unit, this is my sequencer.
Which one is that?
And I can put it in, this is called a Sweet 16, SWT 16. I can put this in, I don't know if you can see the flashing lights over the video too well, but I can push this in tap mode. I can tap over it. I can, there you go, I just did. I can erase any of these sounds.
So that looks like a good on-the-fly performance-based
all of this
sequencer.
is very on the fly, yeah. So now I go
and there's
back
so
and now,
many different options for sequencing. It's unreal.
So there, we just made something new.
And then, so you could get modules that are sequencers. You could have an external sequencer like an Arturia BeatStep or one of those little Korg ones, for example.
Yes, the BeatStep works very well for sequencing the drums,
Yeah.
and it'll also let you sequence a synthesizer at the same time.
Yeah, I like
which
the kind
is
of
very convenient.
that for a live performance setup where and you want to have like easy control over a lot of stuff. Something like the Arturia BeatStep Pro would be probably ideal. And there's a new Korg one coming out soon, I think, that's got multi-track.
Yes, that has a lot of good stuff in it. So let's bring up now the Deckard's voice is coming up over the drums now. So here's the first voice.
All right.
Now here's the second voice coming in. And now my favorite is that third voice. Let's talk about this voice for just a split second. Because this gets very interesting. I don't know if you can see this light here. Watch this. So this unit is going through something called a Vacuole.
What's a Vacuole?
So the signal is coming in here, it's running through this little black unit. And a Vacuole is basically, there's a flashlight on this side, and there's a light reader on this side, and it flashes the light and it reads the light. Now, why would you do that? Well, this unit, you see whenever this flashes here, it opens the signal up. So that's what I'm controlling here.
All right.
And what a Vacuole does, eventually this Vacuole is going to die out too. The light reader is not going to work as well. Maybe it's got a 15 or 20 year lifespan, I think. I'll have to get a new one. But what this does is it gives, without using an ADSR and a VCA, this acts as all of that together. So it'll close the sound for me, but this gives a really beautiful decay. Vacuoles are known to give a nice little trail, but it is what it is. This one's a little shorter than this one, so it's up to me to wire it together. If I want the sound to be longer, I'd have to put it in here, and I can't change it when I'm moving it.
Okay.
But I can change the pulse going into this. And now that's in time with the music. That's if you divide that by 64, it's on the beat.
All right, so it's just clock dividing.
Right, and now if I clock divide really slow, let's see, this slow, you can change the kind of the rhythm of the notes. Okay, let's drop that down. So now we put that on top of the original voice going through the filters.
I like that melody.
It's
nice and smooth and trippy, but it's making me a little sleepy.
It's a little pretty.
How do we make this more energetic and driving?
So I can dirty this synth up a little. Again, I walk across the room and get a distortion unit, but I can put some pulse width modulation.
All right. I think if a more complex, brighter tone, and then also when it's chopping up more, it's good. And also, you're playing just from a musical standpoint. You've sequenced these long, sustained, melodic notes, right? Which is nice and ambient and moody and atmospheric, especially with the effects on it. But like, can we turn that sound into something more rhythmically driving?
Here's something. Let me see if you can see what I'm doing here. So I just unplugged the output of it, and now I'm going to take the synthesizer, and it's going to go through the same filter as the drum machines. So now we lose it if I move the filter too much on the drums.
Oh, I see. So you're mixing it in through the...
But I'm mixing it in through here, yeah.
The Queen of Pentacles. And it sounds
now
cool.
It's getting lost with my tom.
It's integrated in with the drum groove now, which is
which is very interesting, and it's all marching as one unit, as one.
I had an idea, like as a producer, I'm thinking, like, what if you could do both?
You can. I can. So that's just signal routing. So actually, I was doing that originally. I was running some of the pentacles through my distortion, my my delay and my reverb as well, just a little bit.
All right.
And it kind of gives a little more dirt to the whole thing. But I already have reverb on the drums.
Okay.
I actually have distortion on the drums too, if I could find it. Plus, I can change let's change my samples here. You want a little harsher? That's harsher.
Oh yeah. That's distorted.
Let's bring it down.
I love the sound of a 909 style clap through, or an 808 style clap through distortion. It sounds amazing.
Through distortion. Yeah. And through the filter.
We have another question from Tuseth. What do you think about automated grooves like Euclidean sequencing, like generative?
Euclidean sequencers are wonderful.
Yeah.
If anyone listening doesn't know what a Euclidean sequencer is, it takes the 16 notes that you have, and if you drop 3 notes into a 16 pattern Euclidean, it'll spread those 3 notes out as far as it can. If you add a 4th note, it'll spread those 4 notes out as far as it can. It sounds weird. Why would you just spread the notes out like that? But if you do that, you end up creating most of the drum patterns that mankind plays on their own, which is very interesting. The rhythms that have
rhythms come up, can be very, mathematical. Like you can design it and have it repeat and have it. And I think Euclidean sequencing is really good for repetitive grooves. So I think it could work really well for techno, although one thing I find about it's not really random, it seems sort of random, I would say it's sort of pseudo-random sometimes. If it changes too much, you could kind of lose track of the groove a little bit. Sometimes you need a balance between strict repetition and that random, pseudo-random variation or Euclidean variation.
That's what it's all about, is finding
So like what I would do is I might have a strict, kick drum, hi-hat, snare drum doing the main backbeat and then have the toms and other mid-range or high-frequency percussion being controlled by a Euclidean or semi-random sequencing. So you combine that kind of variation over time from the Euclidean sequencing with the steady programmed step sequenced kick drum, etc. And that's a nice combination, I would say.
Yes. And again, you can just make a 4-beat pattern and sample it, and then bring that over to your in the box thing and go nuts with it.
Well, I mean, I don't have any big plans to build up a Eurorack system very soon. If I were, however, it would definitely be integrated into like my DAW setup, and I would be multi-tracking and sampling and resampling and layering as a source for interesting, unique sounds to make techno with. It's amazing.
So here's a little kind of more like an acid-y sound. And this is a digital unit that I have in the rack that gives me 8 different voices.
Can you bring that down an octave or so, like a lower, more bass? Oh, let's hear that as a bass, like two octaves down, maybe.
Okay, I've got it now. It's all the way down.
There we go.
So those are chords.
It's high again.
To go lower, I'd have to change the sequencer on it, which we can do, which we can rewire.
I like the digital plucky kind of. It's almost like EBM industrial.
That little plucky thing you just heard was actually another Car Plus Strong, similar to this one that we heard, which is you take a burst of static, a very fine burst of static, and you filter it, and then feed it back into itself, and that mimics the sound of a string plucking.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the types of synthesis we go over in my synthesis and sound design for producers course at 343 Labs. Even though I don't do modular synthesis specifically, all of the concepts that we're talking about here with PJay absolutely apply to any synth, whether it's hardware or software or modular or not. So
I would think you'd have better luck teaching synthesis using this modular stuff.
Well, I have thought about incorporating more of that just from the beginning to get the basics and the fundamentals down before we get into more complex stuff. And anyway, I want to announce our winner. Congratulations. Ira Sather Olson, you have won the Isotope Vocal Synth plugin. We'll be in touch with you about that. So again, congratulations and enjoy. It's a really good, cool plugin, definitely. And if you have no idea what to do with it or not sure how to use it, well, that's why we're here. 343 is a music school. We do online courses. We do these live streams almost every day. So we're here to, as teachers, as instructors, as presenters here on YouTube to share what we know, to share the knowledge. And so, yeah, we're here to help. Let us know. You can come to our Discord if you want to know more about synthesis. I hang around there every now and then. You can ask me questions, and our other instructors are there to check in and see how things are doing. And of course, like-minded individuals, other music producers, and people who are learning about this stuff are all there. So come back to the stream, subscribe here, get the notifications. We're like 9,000 something on the subscriptions now. It would be really great if any of you haven't done this yet. We want to get up to 10,000. That's our goal. So help us out, give us a like, however you feel. I'm glad you've been here. This has been so much fun hanging out with PJay and doing the modular synthesis thing. I have been learning as much as all of you. This is something I've known about, but I haven't really dived into it, so it's really great. And I think, I don't know, PJay, you're going to be setting up lessons or...
Yeah, now that COVID's kind of winding down, I'm going to start giving more classes.
Okay.
Every once in a while, before COVID, I was giving free Modular 101 class on Tuesday nights above our little restaurant party. I'll probably go back and do that. Here's Techno for you, right?
Now we're banging.
I really love the drums through a filter. It's always been my favorite.
It's such a fun thing to perform with too. It's an easy, satisfying modulation to make in real time when you're performing. It's just like, you know, what DJs do on a DJ mixer.
Well, it's funny. The filter I have on here is actually a low pass to the left and a high pass to the right, and we all call that a DJ filter.
Exactly.
You don't see that otherwise.
You see that on a Pioneer DJ mixer.
You see it on because you want to use that on a process that's been mostly already tweaked out. So when you've got a full track, it's nice to actually use the two of them together.
All right.
There we go. See, you get that really
sub in there.
Yeah. And again, my favorite filter to do this with has always been a mini Moog filter. So this is pretty close to that.
Let me just interrupt you again. We have a couple more questions here. Enigmatic Onion wants to know if you, PJay, have a YouTube or a Twitch channel.
If what?
Do you have a Twitch stream or a YouTube channel?
You know, I'm a little weird. I keep as you know, I keep myself very underground with this.
Sure.
I don't publicize much. For many years, I would not release any of my material. If you wanted to hear me, you wouldn't hear me on a record. You had to come hear one of my live sets. No, I'm actually very hard to find. There's no biography of me out there or anything like that. Come to one of my classes though, and I'll, I will start putting up more material soon. I need to start a YouTube channel, and doing this with you, maybe you'll push me into...
well, we talked about that. We got you set up with the cameras and everything, and you can see it's not that difficult to get going, and you could easily make videos and post them on YouTube on a regular basis. I'm sure you'd have a lot of people following you because
this is fun. This has been very fun talking to you. As we,
I like how you've been breaking things down, and it's very educational. A lot of good details. So, let's see. It's about time. I've got to wind this down. We're going to say goodbye to everybody. Congratulations again to our winner. Thanks again to PJay. Really glad to have you. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. And Two Seth says, I think I've seen PJay doing some DFAM YouTube videos. Did you really?
No, but it's funny because I actually... with Eurorack modules, I've created my own DFAM using some different modules that gives me the sound and the power of that, but with a lot more options.
Got it.
The DFAM's an excellent unit, and the DFAM is a Moog kick going through a Moog filter. So it's this gorgeous sounding unit. Very easy way to start in modular if you're looking to start in modular.
Very good.
I would also recommend the Make Noise, they call it the O-Coast or the No-Coast, is a little square box that's got modular within it, and you can wire it. Some of these units you can patch to itself. If you want to start with modular, look for the O-Coast.
I've thought about getting one of those.
Sample. Yeah, John, get one, sample it, and use those sounds digitally, and you'll have never buy a sample, make your own samples, homemade. Whether it's a phrase or a single drum hit, always make your own samples.
Nice. One more thing in the chat. Someone asked for the Discord link, but this person is on Twitch. I'll just tell you guys if you need to. I don't have it handy to copy and paste right now. Maybe if someone catches this in time from 343, they'll drop it in there. But if you go to the YouTube video for this stream later on, there's a Discord link in the description of the video there. So Thanks once again. I am finally going to sign off. We could just keep doing this all day, couldn't we? I know you just want to
Totally. This is fun. I can talk all day about this stuff.
Cool. All right. So
thanks for having me, John.
You're welcome.
This has been fun.
We have to do it again. Thanks again to all of you. I'm going to sign off now. Come back on Monday for tips and tricks, and I'll see you guys next week with Radioactive Man. Fingers crossed. Adios, everyone.